Welcome back to the Soapbox Business Show. On episode 7, we have the opportunity to talk to someone who, in my humble opinion, has reached the pinnacle of her profession. We're joined by Arianna Shining Star, a professional colorist who works on perfecting color for feature films, episodic series, commercials, music videos, and more. Arianna has worked with all sorts of prestigious brands and artists, from commercial campaigns for companies like Nintendo, Nike, Ralph Lauren, Taco Bell, Starbucks, PlayStation, Coca Cola, the list goes on, and music videos for artists like Shakira, J-Lo, Ed Sheeran, Rihanna, and Justin Bieber, and many more. On the long form side of things, Arianna has also colored several films and television series, including most recently an episodic series on Apple TV called Super League, The War for Football, as well as 2 features, Late Bloomers and The Angry Black Girl and Her Monster, which just premiered at South by Southwest and are on their way to a theatrical run later this year. Arianna, welcome to the show. I've been looking forward to talking to you. How you doing?
Super psyched to chat with you as well. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
You know, we talked a little bit off air or off recording here. You're the first guest I get to geek out with who works in production. And I'm really looking forward to digging in on
I'm honored.
Things here. Little background for the audience. Can you set the stage? Tell us a little bit about who you are, your background, and the work you're doing right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I got my start midway through college. I went to USC, not for film, but rather for criminal neuroscience. I had a passion for Mindhunter before Holden went crazy, the first half of Mindhunter, and really wanted to be a criminal profiler. I was fascinated and still am fascinated with what makes people tick, and particularly with criminal propensity. So USC, although, you know, in our world, in our sphere, is known for filmmaking, in the neuroscience sphere is known for just that, for neuroscience. That's a really great neuro program. And I was super psyched to dive right in and learn about chronology from some really awesome experts in the neurobiology field. So doing that for a couple of years at USC, and found myself very solitary doing research. And you'll know, I mean, you know, we know each other already, of course. I love to chat with people. I love the collaborative aspect of what I do now as a colorist. And that was really lacking in neuroscience. It was very solitary, you know, scanning brains, analyzing the results, comparing different parts of the brain matter and between different individuals with higher or lower criminal propensities. And it was endlessly fascinating, but I didn't see it as like a everyday career forever kind of thing. I was very lonely in these neuroscience labs and, you know, running the MRI machines and then sending people on their way. So with kind of complete serendipity, a friend of mine who was interning at Technicolor at the time happened to be shadowing a colorist one day. She and I grabbed dinner, and I'm telling her, like, listen, like, I don't know if I want to scan brains forever. Like, maybe this career path like isn't right for me. Anyways, enough about me. Tell me about your internship. How's it going? And she was like, well, I sat in a dark room all day, and this guy pushed buttons and turned knobs on this big giant keyboard, and it kind of looked like one of those DJ booths. And like, I don't know, his like job title was like colorist or color grader. I don't really get it. And that was kind of like the gist of what she explained to me. And I didn't really get it either. She didn't really fully explain it because she didn't really fully understand it. She kind of just saw it, you know, shadowed a colorist for, you know, I don't know, half an hour during her internship and sat with him and then carried about her internship duties of, you know, coffee and Xeroxing or whatever they may have had her be doing. And it's weirdly, it kind of struck a chord in me. I immediately kind of thought, this, like, I can't forget about this. Like, something was like very serendipitous in me hearing about it. And, you know, a day goes by and I was like, I can't seem to, like, it wasn't like a casual comment that my friend made. Something really struck me. So I started Googling and found a lot of results about dyeing hair when you Google colorist. Okay. And I was like, wait, okay, yeah. I definitely don't know what I'm talking about, but that's definitely not what I'm looking for. I know that much at least. So I picked up the phone and I called the USC Film School, and to their credit, they're amazing. I'm still close with the specific career center rep. Her name is Tori, who's been amazing support in my career. But she, like, bless her, because she essentially was like, it's hard to describe coloring. I personally don't even really understand it, but here's how I can point you in the direction of a couple different places where you can learn more. And I was like, really? Like, I'm not even a film student. Like, I just figured you might be the best person to reach out to. And she was like, no, absolutely. We happen to be doing tours of a couple different facilities that specialize in color, in the next couple weeks, but they're really popular tours. Like, you gotta like, try and be a part of them. Like, what we do is we have all the students write like a couple paragraphs about like why they want to be on this tour. And even though it's supposed to be only film students, like, you sound really interested and like, you're welcome to do it. And essentially I wrote her a couple paragraphs of just gibberish of me basically repeating myself. Like, I just have a really strong feeling I need to be on these tours. Like, I can't stop looking this stuff up and learning. And like, I'm like looking at YouTube videos and, I love fine art. I love technology. Like, this seems like it's this really cool hybrid. I just have a really strong feeling like, please, please, please let me on these tours. And she probably knew that I would be very persistent if she didn't say yes, because she let me on the tour. And I was blown away. Truly from day one, seeing a colorist in action, I thought this was exactly what I've been looking for. I grew up loving to paint and draw and loved, fine art of all different mediums. Specifically painting and drawing though. And then when I got to college, I was kind of like, all right, time to focus. Like, painting is still a hobby of yours, but I'm not going to like be a painter. I had a very narrow perception of what it meant to be a professional creative and really had never considered the film industry.
Interesting.
And yeah, right. Kind of crazy. And then, so when I shadowed these tours and just fell in love truly overnight. I started telling all my friends that were in production and film school, like, I want to color your short film, like, just for fun. Like, it's just like my new hobby. And I swear it wasn't more than a week before it was no longer a hobby and it was like my
life.
Career path.
Yeah.
I kept finding myself totally lost in time in the film school basement at USC, just wanting to color all hours of the day. And I fell in love with it, truly head over heels, and never looked back. With total serendipity of timing too. In one of my psych classes at the time, that week I had learned about flow state. Which, have you ever heard about the concept of flow state? It's really common for artists, particularly to experience, and I had never experienced that.
You want to break it down for anyone in the audience who may not know what
totally.
that is?
So the concept of flow state is it's really common, like I said, in artists, musicians, like physical artists. Where you get really lost in time with something. It can, in not just artist space, it's just extra common in artistic platforms. But basically, you kind of completely lose track of time. So you kind of wind up Alice in Wonderland style, falling through, the rabbit hole, and you can be completely immersed and engaged and passionate about what you're doing, and look up and like 6 hours have blown by. And when I first started coloring that week, I was learning about flow state, and then I experienced it later that week when I was coloring, just like in the wee hours of the morning, in the film school basement, and I'm the only one there, and I'm just like coloring away, pushing buttons, turning knobs, figuring out what this software did, fully with the keyboard and mouse style too. There were no panels or anything, and like looking up YouTube tutorials and doing just this crazy deep dive. And I think from there, that really hit home for me and told me like, oh, this is, you got to follow this interest. This is more than a hobby that you're just going to kind of do for some friends in film school. And I truly never looked back.
That's amazing. So that flow state was kind of like your sign of like, oh, this is my calling. I've lost all sense of time and, wanting to go home or, whatever.
Yeah, it's unlike me to miss a meal too. I don't think I ate dinner that night, and I think I was just totally engaged in what what I was coloring, which was just like some short film and from the film school, and it was just like any footage I could get my hands on, I just fell in love with. And I really always loved the artistic part of my hobbies, and the technical side of neuroscience is what really drew me into neuro. I love how measurable it is. I love how the technology is constantly evolving. I find that the synergy between psychology and or technology and fine arts in color is also elevated even further with like the psychology of story development. And so people often ask me to describe my aesthetic and my style for color, and I have a really hard time describing my style, but I can describe my approach. And I think it really does come down to those two prongs. It comes down from me having a fine arts background and also having a background in this storytelling, like passion for like what makes people tick. And so any project I'm a part of, it always really kind of the inspiration for the color comes from those two approaches.
I've got a lot of things. I wrote notes down here on what I want to ask.
Let's hear it. I mean, I'm open book, all ears.
It's funny you mentioned that you have a hard time describing your aesthetic, because my experience with you was that you very much loved the collaborative process. That was one thing. And then you also, in hearing other things that you've said in other interviews and then just talking to you personally, you do seem to take that story-based approach where your style is not necessarily like, I stick to this type of color palette look and this is my overall way I approach things. It's more of what's going on in the story, what's going on with the characters, and actually am I hearing you right there? That's
Definitely.
Kind of
Yeah, definitely. I certainly, every single project I am a part of, I start from the same home base of what is it that we're trying to achieve, whether it's a branded content piece or thinking about who is the target audience. You know, you may think that story isn't as much of a doesn't play as much of a role in non-narrative material, but it does play just as much of a role, but in a different type of role. So you're thinking about like, who is the target consumer? What aesthetic are they attracted to? What is the brand's ethos? What's the brand's mission? Are they trying, is this campaign looking to rebrand the style and the connection of who their consumer is? And so even in branded content, you're really thinking about people and how to connect with people. And then of course in narrative, it's a bit easier to point to kind of the story playing a big role, but you know, you're always cycling back to this kind of core motivation of how can we use the nuanced detail of color grading to further the mission of the narrative, or externalize the perspective of the protagonist so that the viewer is even further engaged. And all of it comes down to these little tiny adjustments that you layer together and they make for a big impact. But it's like you said, the collaborative aspect is one of my favorite parts of it, because the first and foremost, before I start any project, before the hands are anywhere near the panels, I always like to start with a phone call with the creatives, or if we're sitting side by side, just hearing about what we're trying to achieve here. Whether it's a feature and, you know, this is the director's life story, or a script that you know, they stumbled upon that fell in love with, or if this is, like I said, a commercial campaign or a music video. And even in music videos, you think about like, what are we looking to achieve? Is this like, you know, a super fun celebratory summer ballad kind of situation where it's like going to be a pop song playing on repeat and you're picturing yourself like in a convertible on the PCH, like driving by the ocean? Or is this like a moody kind of anthem? Zooming out for that forest through the trees perspective of what we're looking to achieve is always kind of where I find myself at square one to start out with.
Yeah, I could totally see. I mean, I've worked in like certain narrative style things, but then also there's like the fashion shoot and they just want to convey a certain vibe or an energy, and that is a story if you can unpack that and kind of take that down the line. But going back to what you said, you mentioned Mindhunter. Did you watch the show? You were talking that you are into criminal neuroscience in that way. Did you read I haven't read the book. I've only seen the show.
I have not read the book either. Guilty. I should. I'm a terrible reader. I have a stack of books and a long list on my phone of books that I'm like, oh, I would really enjoy that
eventually.
I got to just start embracing the audiobook world, because I do listen to a lot of podcasts and some audiobooks when I'm coloring. But there's something that I don't know why I feel like it's like cheating. If you're reading an audiobook,
I agree. I feel
in
the
my
same
head,
way.
like I wish I was a really fast reader, but I'm kind of not. I'm kind of a slow reader, and then I get a little bored, and then I fall asleep. I don't know. But no, I have not read the book, but it's a really good show.
I was wondering, because you did mention Mindhunter as like that was like the reason for going into criminal neuroscience. So I was wondering if that was like an inspiration for that choice of studying that. Just being riveted by it.
Yeah, no, the show. Shutter Island is the inspiration.
Okay.
The show came out long after I was interested in that. Shutter Island is like, I think, the most underrated film. Yeah, I feel like people like sometimes make fun of it. I don't know. It's been one of my favorite movies since it came out. I think it's one of the first movies that like I watched and left the theater and was like, oh my God, like and like kind of mind blown. Like I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't watched it. Although if you haven't,
Oh, we
watched it,
can.
like,
We'll
can
give
we
them like a
spoil?
spoiler
I mean,
warning. Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Spoiler warning. If you haven't seen it by now, it's not
Yeah.
like it's like came out this fall.
Mhm.
Like is Leo crazy? Is he not? Does he get it at the end?
I
Does
was
he
gonna
not?
ask you
Like,
your
and
take,
all
yeah.
of these little tidbits throughout, like where Mark Ruffalo like fumbles with his gun, and
Mhm.
it's because he's not used to holding a gun because he's actually a psychologist. He's not a cop, and like there's all these little kind of bits and bobs throughout the film that tease kind of the ending, but then you still kind of don't really know the ending. I think that movie blew my mind, and the concept of psychosis and how people can be set off. I mean, he kind of went on this his experience, like Leonardo DiCaprio's character's experience through the film, is kind of triggered by his wife, and like his wife has her
The
own
trauma.
issues and trauma, but then it through Leo's character in this whole other tailspin, and that movie just blew my mind. And I also think from a visual perspective,
It's beautiful.
this is not something that struck me at the time as much because I didn't really know. I couldn't separate color grading from photography or anything like that.
Mhm.
But from a visual perspective, I think that the team there just really did a phenomenal job. And there's so much. That's one of my favorite films, but it was not Mindhunter. To answer your question, long story short, it was
Okay, all right,
Shutter
cool.
Island instead of Mindhunter.
I was wondering because I was like, I don't think Mindhunter could have been out when she was in college. No way.
No, I think it was. I don't know when. I'm not sure when Mindhunter came out. I want to say it was after I graduated.
Yeah, I think it was like at least 5 years ago, at least.
Yeah.
So then what's your take on the Leo ending? I have mine. I mean, but
Yeah, I think that he knows what he's going through, and it's easier for him to pretend. I think that and that line at the end of "makes you think, boss," and he's like, or it makes you wonder, huh? And then Mark Ruffalo's like, "What is it, boss?" I've seen this movie so many times. And and Leah's like, is it better to live what is it? Oh man, I'm botching it now. Better live a villain or die a free man, something like that. And I think that when he gets up and he walks over to the doctors, I think that he knows that he would just rather be lobotomized and not deal with the trauma.
it's like it's this look he gives. It's that Leo's just
It's that
the
like
great
he's
actor.
smoking and he's like,
It's a fully knowing look.
Yeah, it's almost, and he gets up in such a calm way that it's almost like I've accepted this, and this is just as opposed to like when he's in his like denial state, he's like so much more agitated, and there's a physicality to it, and that's my take. What is yours?
I love it. Pretty much the same. That he would rather live in this psychosis of pretending that it didn't happen rather than living with the reality that it did. And I usually don't like endings that are vague or like kind of like let the writers off the hook.
Normally that like tortures me.
But I think that they did make a decision, and it was for the audience to realize like exactly. It was concrete enough that it was like, okay, the writers didn't just like say we have a get out of jail free card here with this ending.
Yeah, I totally agree. And normally like I actually remember as a child watching Neverending Story and being like, this movie sucks. I hate it. Nobody's gonna explain this to me.
Yeah.
And that like blew my mind in a really bad way when I was little. And so I think I usually am very unsatisfied. Like my favorite thing, unsatisfied when movies don't actually like close the loop. My favorite thing with any movie is when there's like after the credits, like and 10 years later, I'm always like, and then what happened? And Shutter Island, I think that part of what I love so much about it is it was able to kind of not really tie the loop, but tie it just enough that I'm very intrigued and like still I don't know, maybe I think it came out over 10 years ago, right?
And it's very rewatchable too.
And I'm still like every time I watch it, I'm still like I pick up on the little things, and I always like I'll watch it with somebody. Like my husband hadn't seen it in a long time. He's like, I kind of forget the details. And like when he struggles right lighting the cigarette, I like look at him. I'm like, did you catch it? And he's like, yeah, I'm not catching this only. And then at the end, he was like, oh yeah, I remember putting those things together. Anyways, good film.
I lost my train of thought. There was something. Oh, okay. You mentioned something like the 10 years later thing that you love. I feel the same way. I just finished watching the show called Beef on Netflix.
Oh, I haven't seen it.
I'm not going to spoil anything because it's way too soon. But
okay,
I think that I might be giving this away to a director out there. But I was like, you know what? When I make a story like something like this or anything close to like this, I feel like there should be a resolution episode that we just get like a full 40 minutes of just like, what are these people's lives like 10 years from now?
Yes.
And it's just
that.
It's just pure fan, just feeding the fans. Like, we love these people, we love these characters for this season or 2 seasons, and we're just gonna spend 40 minutes of their happy lives, or what's going on here.
There's something to be said, and it's compliments to writing when you care so much about characters that you want to know what else happened with them as people. And I think that the revive, I'm not sure if you're a Sex and the City fan, but
A Sex and the City, I've never watched, other than like a few scattered episodes.
I feel like as a woman, I feel like it's a
rite of passage.
I mean, it's a girl's show. Yeah, it's definitely a rite of passage. The new version is just objectively bad. It's bad writing. The story's lame. Even the acting, I'm like, guys, what happened? Like, I don't know. But I keep watching it, and the reason why is because I care so much about these characters. I just want to know what's new in their lives. And then so credit to the writers whenever that happens, whenever people are like just care enough about the characters.
Yeah. So you mentioned serendipity and the way you got into falling in love with being a colorist and figuring it out. So were you a movie buff growing up? Were you like a TV buff, or because you said that you didn't really think about being a creative as a profession, and yet you kind of just stumbled intentionally, because the maturity to know where to look and to call. I mean, I can't think of much of a better place than being at USC to kind of have that moment happen.
I know, right? That's definitely luck. And I didn't want to go to USC. I wanted to go to the University of Pennsylvania, and I didn't get in. They have the best neuroscience program, and so I was sad, but I was like, well, USC also has a pretty good neuro program, and their neuroscience program is like a feeder school to UPenn's grad neuroscience. So I was like, all right, maybe I can like target to go to grad school there and get my PhD and JD at UPenn, but I didn't get in. And it is just like life directs you in the ways that you're supposed to. I really believe that. I was not at all a movie buff growing up. I had hippie parents that didn't even have cable, or really TV. I would rent the same little VHS tapes over and over again. And so definitely not at all a movie buff growing up.
So about your hippie parents, I've heard you mention them before. You grew up in Northern California, right?
Yeah, in Sonoma County in Northern California.
Can you tell us the story behind your name? Because I didn't tell the audience. I should probably preface. I mean, I don't live in California. I live closer. I'm like near Miami. But I stumbled upon your work on Instagram, and I was like, she's so damn good. Like, I'm just going to follow her. And I think I messaged you like years ago where I was like, I don't have anything right now, but I would like to work with you in the future on something. Your name always stood out to me, Shining Star. So what's the story behind that?
Hippie parents, like I said, they met at a Grateful Dead concert during the song Shining Star. And chose to give me that as a middle name. They definitely didn't know that I would use it for work.
Did you always intend to use it for work?
Not. I mean, when I started coloring and I thought about like, okay, I'm gonna like build an IMDb base. I knew eventually I would change my last name when I got married, and I thought maybe I'll go with my first and middle name professionally, so that when my last name changes, it's not like a rebrand then. Something
can stick at least a little,
Yeah, and then kind of coincidentally, I mean, people are always like, Shining Star, I've seen your name in credits before on this other thing, and because it's such a memorable name, I mean. Not having a John Smith kind of name, it makes people remember when they've seen it the second time.
Yes.
But yeah, people often ask if it's a stage name, if I'm Native American, because I kind of look like I could be maybe. I'm Italian, but like people often
first thought
think,
was maybe Native American.
Are you Native? Like, and which would be cool. But no, hippie parents.
Okay. Are you a Grateful Dead fan?
Somewhat, yeah. On like the perfect 85-degree day in LA when I'm, like I said, driving on the PCH. I don't know. That's like a moment where I listen to some Grateful Dead, and that feels like right to the vibe. But I've been to so many shows with my parents in the first couple of years of my life that I know so much of the music like kind of in my bones. Like where I'll listen to it and I'll be like, this is so familiar to me. Like growing up around it in the house and everything.
That's a perfect vibe. Driving the PCH is beautiful. I've only done it once, but it was gorgeous. I drove it all the way up to Carmel, and it was
that's great.
Yeah.
I do pinch myself all the time being in Santa Monica. Every time you take that turn and you see the ocean, it's like,
Although we've got something you don't have right now, which is rainy weather, and it's glorious outside. It's like perfectly rainy, which You guys missed the
no,
rain.
we don't have that beautiful rain. Not the same.
Yeah. So when you got into choosing to be a colorist, how defined were those aspirations? Did you always know like colorist for me, or what did it start as another aspect of production? Because my personal
Yeah,
experience is usually I've seen colorists start like with post-production in general, like editing and all
totally.
together, and then they fall in love with the color side specifically, and then they're like, okay, then I'll do color only
Yeah,
here.
I've yet to meet another colorist like myself that has exclusively been a colorist. And I think it has to do with the serendipitous way I found color. I really truly stumbled into it, whereas most colorists, because it's such a specific niche within the industry, people kind of don't even know it exists unless you're already in the industry.
They don't.
So
Yeah.
I even have like actor and producer friends that are like, I don't quite get it, you know? So it's like you said, people that were, you know, most colorists were DPs that didn't love being on set, but loved, you know, impacting the image and loved that blend of art and science, or editors that didn't want to hear the same audio loop and then learned that their buddies that are colorists get to listen to podcasts all day instead of the audio for whatever they're working on. And so they become colorists and just fall in love with that. So no, I think that in some ways that affords me a very unique perspective, because I come in really exclusively with a colorist perspective, and I draw from my background in psychology and in fine art more than I do any production knowledge. And I think that that's actually been helpful to me.
That kind of takes me to my next question for you, which is your background in psychology and fine art. You've mentioned more of the psychology side, but where did the fine art begin? Who got you into painting and drawing, and where did that all begin for you?
Early ages. My parents are both pretty artistic, and I'm an only child. What does an only child do? She colors.
Yeah.
So my parents, when I told them about color grading, they're like, well, that makes sense. You've been coloring since
Your
day
whole life.
one. And truly, even like my husband sometimes is like, what did you do as an only child? I'm like, I colored. Like I had so many coloring books, and I had, you know, the giant 150 count crayon box. And sometimes apparently my mother tells me that even from a very young age, one of my things that I would like to do before I started coloring is I would dump out all the crayons. I would have them all on the ground, like when I'm coloring, and then at the end of it, always I liked putting them back one by one in color order. And so I don't know, it's something that I've always
Telltale
loved.
sign.
I went to a couple of really artistic schools that I'm really grateful that I had the opportunity to, like my middle school, elementary school, and high school were all had strong emphasis on the fine arts. And my art teacher in high school really wanted me to apply to art school, but I was like, no, like I don't want to paint forever, just like all day and like try and make a career out of that. Like, no, I don't want to sell my paintings and whatever. That wasn't what I was interested in. And then I still am very close with my art teacher from high school. And when I fell in love with color, I kind of reached out to her and I was like, guess what? Like, I kind of am like artistic again and like professionally. And she was like, what? And she didn't know about it either. She's, you know, has a traditional fine arts background. And you know, we were grabbing coffee over a winter break when I was home, and I've still stayed in touch with her. Her name is Hillary, and she's fantastic. But I learned a lot from her over the years. But she had asked me a really interesting question at one point, where she was like, "What do you think that you draw from in your fine arts experience to when you're coloring? Like anything that like, you know, you developed in art classes or things like that?" And I was like, "Oh no, yeah, no." At first, I was like, "Oh no, it's like totally different. It's like digital art. It's like I'm like I'm like enhancing like the vision of the filmmakers, and it's like, you know, it's kind of different." And she pointed two really interesting things out to me that I never forgot. Firstly, that I actually use a lot of the like kind of key tent poles of making a dynamic and interesting looking image. Whether it's, you know, your eye first going to the brightest part of the frame, having color contrast really create an impactful image, emphasizing bright and dark things, and you know, shaping light, and all of that comes directly from painting. And then another thing that she pointed out that I thought was very interesting is that growing up, you know, the assignments that we would get would be broad and in a really good way, like, but they would be challenging for me to come up with what I wanted to do. So, you know, I recall we had an assignment where the assignment was like, use scissors. And it was like, you could use scissors to make the project. You could paint a pair of scissors. You could draw a pair of scissors. You could sculpt a pair of scissors. It was just so broad. But I would be kind of tormented with the opportunity of too many options.
Yeah.
And I would often really struggle to find that initial concept and the initial idea. And then when I finally would kind of have something, I could run with it. Like once I like knew what I was doing, I could run with it. And I loved the finessing part, and I loved the editing part, and I loved the polishing part. And she had pointed out that's, hey, that's so interesting because, in color, as a colorist, in a lot of ways, that first bit is the footage you get. And then it's up to me to elevate it. So in a lot of ways, the role of being a colorist plays to my natural strengths of looking at something and seeing how we can enhance it further. Whereas if you ask me to write a treatment, I think that is a different kind of creative skill set. I can't tell you how many times I've been in a color session. We're grading up a music video, and the director's like, "Hey man, do you mind looping this song? I'm gonna write a treatment. While we're grading this other video, I have a treatment to write for this next one." And I'm like, "Yeah, for sure." And we're listening to it on loop a couple times, and they're like, "All right, I'm picturing disco rink," and I'm like, "Really? How does that come to your brain? That's so cool." And that's just not my natural tendencies, the way I think about creativity. But as soon as they say disco rink, I'm like, "Ooh, set it." You
can run with that. Yeah,
make it kind of vintage, and definitely leg warmers for sure. And you could go cool, super cool with neons, but it could be a muted neon where it's a nostalgic kind of palette, and then I can run with it a bit more with just my natural kind of the way my brain works. So I'm grateful for my art teacher Hillary for pointing that out, because I always thought that was so interesting, and definitely explains in a lot of ways why I think fell in love with color grading as kind of that extension of elevating other because I really see it that way. Is as much as I am an artist and colorists are artists in their own right, and same with composers. I really see it as a tremendous privilege that it's up to me to elevate the creative's vision initially, and my work is an extension of building upon the initial concept and seeing how I can take it further. So that's always been something I think is one of my favorite parts of the role. There's
definitely something to that in terms of when you have a sandbox, you can go as deep as you want within the sandbox. I used this kind of example as an anecdote, but when we first started doing podcasts, my co-host and business partner Zach, who wasn't able to make it today, but we first started with a general topic show. We could talk about anything. We're like, "Oh, we'll just talk about anything." That was the first thing. That was 3. It was 3 years ago. We'll just talk about anything, and then 3 or 4 episodes in, we both kind of came to the same conclusion. I was like, "How the hell do you prep for a show that's about everything? You can talk about anything.
It's too broad.
It's too much." And so I was like, "Let's do a show about entertainment, and then business, and then you can dive as deep as you want within that thing."
Sure. Yeah.
With color and with every aspect, it's interesting because I do see you as as a painter in a sense, you are, but it's a collaborative painter, right? I mean, you're working within a team, and that's the thing. With production, is I fell in love with the collaborative process and the rewarding feeling that is when you work with an incredible team who's all together working towards one goal. And that's just one vision that everybody's working towards and contributing their piece. When that's done, there's no greater feeling of being a part of that. You need an army. I mean, just like anything. I think the last film I saw in theaters was John Wick, the latest one, and I told my dad.
Amazing.
I told my dad, I'm like, "Hey, stay till after the credits to watch there's a scene at
the end scene." Yeah.
And he's like, "I've been here for 10 minutes. Are you sure this scene?" I'm like, "That's how many people it takes."
Everybody that was a part of the film. I know, and always, that it really takes a full village.
This is a corporation that's churns up for this project that feeds a lot of people, and this is the army of people it takes to get something this great done. But the fact that you fell in love with that is a testament to you as a team player, a role player, and then also it is fine art in a way, the way that you meld color and you tell stories. And I tried to watch a bit of Ibiza, the film that you did on Netflix, correct? I'm right on that?
Yeah,
okay.
Totally.
Okay. And the beginning scene, you can tell this girl is done with New York. She is
over
complete,
it. Yeah.
and the color matches this sense of
Yes, it's like this grungy,
you want to get out
gritty,
of there.
like
You're watching and you're like,
sweaty
mhm,
August in New York,
mhm.
and just
Even Statue of Liberty
feels,
is lighting up a cigarette. She's
yeah, it's like
yeah.
claustrophobic.
Uh-huh.
Yep, totally.
And you match that perfectly with the color, because I was there like, all right, we got to get out of New York. Like I'm itching for her in this cubicle of hers with this cold lighting, and everything feels so, you know, antiseptic almost. You know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're dead on. That was a fun film, and they
Hmm.
certainly let me run wild with that one. And there's kind of four main looks of that film. Whereas, like, we start in New York, he said, and then when we leave New York, we go straight to Barcelona, and it's just like dipped in gold. It's like
Hmm.
sun drenched. They are on vacation with their best friends. They've escaped. They're
Hmm.
on the ocean. They're getting sunburned. Like, they're like totally sun drenched
Yeah.
in the best way. And then when we go to the Ibiza, it's where all the romance happens. And we got
Hmm.
pinks and purples and all these like really passionate, like vibrant colors. And then when the character returns to New York, she kind of returns with like a fresh perspective, and it's a bit more of a cleaner New York look. It's not nearly as grungy or as gritty. It's kind of like, it still is industrial, but it's a little bit more vibrant. And we certainly intended to kind of externalize her perspective of the city
Coming back refreshed.
Yeah, she came back refreshed, and it's kind of the idea.
I don't know if this was intentional, but the moment she gets the news that she's going to Barcelona, the next few shots of New York is way more romantic. It's less, it's like going home with good news. Like the whole day, everything is better, you know? And I don't know if that was on purpose, but
it was.
you see the shots of the train going by, and everything looks the way, if you've ever been to New York and fall in love with it like I have.
The good parts of the city.
Good parts.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, you're dead on.
You kind of already answered my question about what your approach to the collaborative process is, but we can kind of dive a little deeper into that. I've heard you mention working directly with, the cinematographer and respecting the work that's done in camera. What is your approach to color and the collaborative process that helps you stand out, and that's helped you in your career personally?
I think really always kind of coming back to that core mission of elevating the story, elevating the visuals, and making sure that the method in which I do that honors and respects and elevates the mission of the filmmakers. Mm-hmm. The collaborative portion always, again, starts with me just a phone call or sitting side by side with the director or DP, and that's no different for a music video versus a feature film versus TV series. So all of that comes from conversation and really getting to understand thoughts, concerns, ideas, any project, big or small. Like, there's some things that maybe didn't go according to plan on set. It's good for me to have a heads up on if there are certain things that the team doesn't necessarily love as much during the edit, or if there's like scenes in the edit they return to every time and they're like, damn, I can't wait to see this in color. It's gonna look even better, And I also encourage conversations earlier on for all my features. For the most part, I'm having conversations in pre-production with the team.
I was going to ask, all the way back in pre?
Yeah, that's my preference. It's not always the case, but it's certainly most common that when I'm brought on for a feature, I am having conversations in pre-production with the team about lens choice, camera choices. I'll often do lens testing. We'll develop a LUT for the show for features, and then the team will shoot with that, and the DIT will finesse the kind of that LUT on set with Daly's color. And so, the conversation can't start too soon. To me, although color comes in at the end, the more you think about what the end result is earlier on, the further we get to take it in color. People often ask me the difference between color correction and color grading. And there's, for the record, no difference. It's, a definitional difference. But I like to think about it as like the two different parts of the process. Correction is any kind of fixing things that, if there wasn't quite time to add a flag on the set here and we want to, carve down some of the light, or if, the sun is setting a little faster than the team can get things going, we want to brighten things up in this scene or whatever. And then the grading aspect is kind of more of that storytelling aspect and like the enhancing. And in every project, big or small, there's always a little bit of correction and a little bit of grading. And it's always kind of that balance.
I have a really nerdy question that's really off sidebar, but if you haven't watched the show, you can't answer it for me. But have you seen House of the Dragon?
I haven't.
Okay,
Can't
never
answer.
mind. When you watch it, I'll ask you off air.
Okay, we'll do a follow up.
Maybe we'll record that answer, and it'll be a micro piece. Well, they shot a whole episode that was supposed to be at night during the day, and I was like, how would you approach that? Because you can almost clearly tell that it's daytime and they're shooting for night. But anyways, I will
say the key for day for night is trying to avoid trying to minimize hard shadow and hard light, because you don't get hard shadows, you don't get hard light with night. So if you can avoid that and have more kind of ambient light, it's a lot easier, and like minimize reflective details, whether it's on garments or in production design. Minimize reflective details where you get like pings of light, because there's a certain point when you dim them down, that's kind of the giveaway. So when people ask, how do I shoot day for night? Usually there's a lot of things you can do in production design, costume design and lighting that help set the stage for us to take it further in color and be able to kind of sell it better.
She's giving away nuggets for free, folks.
There you go.
You mentioned before of getting involved early. Can you walk us through the process of are you creating looks when you're doing these lens tests? Like how involved do you want to get? Because as a colorist, most of the time you're seeing the finished product last or having your hands on it last. So what does that sort of prep work look like for you in your ideal world? Like in a project where you get to do all of that and do those lens tests?
In an ideal world, lens tests are done in the environment in which the scenes are going to be filmed. So you have some daylight, some nighttime, some interior, some exterior, whatever the actual script calls for. I also think that I like doing lens tests with costume tests, particularly because there are certain times where, like, if we're going to be playing with a look that's really desaturated, but then the costume designer is interested in having these punchy reds throughout the film to symbolize something or other, it might impact the way that we desaturate things. And so if in my ideal world, I would love to have camera tests with a variety of different lenses and have the team kind of play around with them in the grading suite together. We develop a LUT for the show, and we can push and pull things around with as much information on screen as possible. It's a little tougher when it's in kind of a camera prep bay. That was my question. Yeah, on location camera tests are just certainly preferred,
but difficult to
what it does is it really just means that we can push the show LUT a bit further because we have more information in front of us. Whereas if we have less information, I'm less likely to push a stronger look on the show LUT, and we'll return to the look more in color later on and forward things along.
Are you usually on set for those tests if you can be, or do you prefer to be on set? Or
I would love to be, but it's rare that I'm able to. Usually from like a scheduling perspective, I'm not able to make it to set, but I love going to set. And I think that this shows my coming into the industry as a colorist cards a bit, because anytime I'm on set, I feel like a kid in a candy shop. I'm like, this is where the magic happens. Like I love, my lack of set experience, I think shows, because I just get so excited when I go to set. I really like going to set when I'm like have a buddy, like an editor or something, someone else that's equally useless, because otherwise people are like, who's the chick by Crafty that like was not here for the last week, like, so I like having a buddy. Like I need a sidekick on set, but I do really love going to set. I think it's so much fun.
You mentioned making show LUTs, so then you will create a look for the show for like the DIT to use on set as something like here's a placeholder look of where the direction we want to go is.
Exactly.
Okay. Gotcha. Cool. I've seen in your IMDb credits that you have taken on multiple roles in color. Can you break down what the difference between a colorist and a color assistant does, like the work process for both of them?
Yeah, absolutely. So color, the funny thing is with our industry, there's like multiple names for the same thing.
Yeah, colorist, I was going to ask, because you'll see finishing producer as well. And
colorist, color grader, same thing. Color assist, assistant colorist, same thing. So assistant colorist's main role is kind of before and after, right before and right after color. So that comes from prepping material and getting things ready for the colorist to be able to work on, and also prepping the room to make sure that the room is ready for the clients, as well as the colorist to kind of walk in, sit down, and dive right into the creative. So that's getting the projector turned on, making sure the timeline is correct and pulled up. Quite a lot like being an assistant editor, of like in terms of just kind of prepping the project and making sure everything is organized as well. And then doing the deliverables as well. So rendering out the final film and then additional assist roles can be, the colorist can set a look on a hero shot of the film, and an assistant colorist can match the look established throughout. It's a bit more of like an advanced assist role. And then the colorist will watch it through and kind of finesse it and polish it. And so the role kind of depends on the relationship and the level of experience, but that's the kind of broader strokes picture. And then finishing producer is exactly what it sounds like, the producer for coloring. So they manage the ship start to finish from color. So receiving the material from dailies and getting the conform all built for prior to color, and then also managing the schedule and the workflow needs from a technical perspective can get kind of complex. So it's certainly a highly specialized role being a finishing producer for coloring, because they have to manage the creative workflow and the technical workflow from the beginning all the way through the end pipeline. So they're coming in way before the colorist usually in the conversation. Say you're booking a colorist for a feature, the colorist learns about it and says from the creatives and says, great, here's my team, here's how we can execute. And then the finishing producer will get all the ducks in a row, and then the colorist comes in, does the coloring, and then the finishing producer still has more ducks to get in a row after the color is totally done. So it's a really big responsibility being a DI producer. Interesting.
I think that's gonna give a lot of clarity for people out there. Did you always have this work ethic? Where did you develop this like diligence, persistence from?
I think I've been very fortunate to always love my work, and so it's maybe that naturally kind of transfers into if you love what you do kind of thing. I'm very, very privileged to be a part of a lot of projects that I'm really passionate about from a creative standpoint, and also just like working with the creatives. And so I'm very blessed. It makes work fun for me.
Gotcha. You worked for Paramount Pictures and you did HDR remasters. Did you do anything that were like epic old classics of films? Like, what was that process like to remaster?
Some Terminator. Definitely HDR is really an incredible whole new world for, it's not that new, but it's still ever changing regularly. And you mentioned Ibiza earlier. Ibiza was a really interesting kind of case study for HDR content, because it was the first film that Netflix finished as a hero version in HDR. So historically, the HDR version was, we do the theatrical version. So for example, Tomorrowland is one of the films that was an assistant colorist on. And that was
Tomorrowland, you said?
Yeah, the George Clooney film.
Okay.
Yeah. And that one was the first HDR film. We did the theatrical version on a projector, and then we did what's known as the video version on like a standard monitor. That would be like the home video Rec. 709 color. Yeah. And then we did the HDR color, and that was pretty crazy to see it for the first time. But when it came to Ibiza, Netflix, and the creatives had approached me and said, we'd love for you to color this film. And once I kind of had signed on with the creatives, Netflix was like, all right, so we want to do something different here. We want to kind of flip the workflow on its head. And if you, for anybody who doesn't know what HDR is, the standard dynamic, it stands for a high dynamic range. So we have everything up till HDR came through was SDR, standard dynamic range. So without getting too technical, the standard dynamic range of brightness is 100 stops of brightness. HDR begins at 1000 stops of brightness. So it gets not just much, much brighter, but also much, much darker. So what that means is you get to play with more detail in the highlights and more detail in the shadows. Just because you have 1000 or more, again, without getting too detailed.
No worries. No worries.
It can go beyond the 1000, but just because you have the 1000 steps doesn't mean you necessarily need to use it, but it basically is a bigger sandbox to play in. And so conceptually, it makes sense.
Uh-oh.
Yes. Can you hear me?
I did. I lost you there for a few seconds.
Okay. I'll rewind in a second. So if you think about it, HDR being a much bigger sandbox to play in, what we'd start with was actually the HDR version and then make that look its best and then do an SDR version from there, as opposed to the inverse, which would be kind of falsely expanding
What's
and
not
trying
there.
to bring back content that's not really there. So it's like HDR, but you're not really gaining as much. And that actually ended up being like when we kind of were guinea pigs for the workflow for Netflix, we actually totally changed the way the whole industry does HDR content. And that was the first one. And so it was really fun to be a kind of guinea pig in the experiment, so to speak, and really refresh the HDR workflow for the whole industry standard.
How would that typically work when you have to do a theatrical version, HDR version? I wouldn't even you just kind of described the approach with the SDR where you take it from the HDR version, but do you have to do two separate runs of color there for the theatrical and the HDR, or what is that process like?
Yeah, you do. You do kind of like a trim pass for HDR. Something that's, I think, endlessly fascinating to me is how much workflow varies film to film. So it totally depends, particularly what the end result is usually what kind of dictates the workflow. So if it's if it's a Netflix film, mastering it HDR first makes most sense. If it's going to have a theatrical run, sometimes still the theatrical pass takes the kind of hero seat. And then the HDR material is done separately, but it does differ project to project.
Theoretically, it makes a lot of sense to flip the workflow and start HDR and work
totally
from there.
Yeah, which is why when Chris and Steven, the Netflix image scientists, they've been there forever. Those guys, it was my first time working with them on that film, and this was like we were having these conversations in like 2016, 2017. About whether that would make sense, and they were like, well, what do you think? Like from an image science perspective, it makes sense. Like, what do you think as a colorist? And I was like, yeah, totally agree. Totally makes sense. Let's give it a shot and see how it goes. And it went great. So much so, like I said, that we just kind of reinvented the workflow for all that kind of content, especially direct to streaming content.
So cool. I was gonna ask like a follow-up question. I didn't put this in the notes. Is there any project you've worked on or seen a talent or director that you've been like nerded out, like, oh my God, I'm coloring work for so-and-so, or so-and-so's on this, like that you were just so personally stoked about?
There's
too many.
There's a lot. Yeah. No one specific comes to mind of like, oh, that's like, I would say like in terms of like bucket list things, and one of the people always, especially when I was doing a ton more music videos the music videos industry has changed quite a lot in the last few years. But when I was doing a ton of music videos, there's just not as many of them now. Labels used to throw a lot of cash at a couple hero music videos a year, and now they throw very little cash at a lot of smaller music videos a year. And those music videos, I mean, 5 years ago, they looked nothing like what they did in the early 2000s. Those were like the heyday, right, of music videos. But even in the last like 5 years, they've changed a lot. But anyhow, when I was doing a lot of them back to back, people often ask like, who's your bucket list artist to work with? Like if there's a good music video like of a band that you would love to do. And I always said Coldplay, because Coldplay has been one of those mainstays. Like I don't remember a time, like my music taste has kind of shifted and changed over over the years here and there. I guess a lot over the years here and there, if I think back to like in high school, I was listening to Def Leppard. But Coldplay's always been on the list. And so that always was my bucket list one. And so when I did finally get the chance to do a Coldplay music video, I did tell the director. It was for Cry, Cry, Cry. And it's such a sweet music video. And it's like this beautiful like love story and like this awesome dance sequence and three different kind of eras of this couple meeting and falling in love and growing old together. But I told the director when we finished, I was like, I need a new bucket list now. Like people always ask me what my bucket list music video creative would be. And I did it. So,
they're the greatest show I've seen live.
They have great shows. I've been to a few of them and they're always really fun. Chris is just such an engaging, frontman, and like from even the times where he's like brought people on stage to play piano with him, or been like, surprise, it said Sheeran, and like shows the spotlight. Like he's just so fun. It
was incredible. Like it lived up to the hype. The best like intimate performer I've ever seen of somebody who really engages crowd is John Mayer. I mean, he's he's insanely good at it.
I will say he's probably he might be my second bucket list.
Second bucket list?
John Mayer, or U2 also. I've always loved U2. My dad played so much U2 growing up. They've also been like a forever favorite band. But I think without a doubt, my favorite concerts I've ever seen, like live performances, have all been John Mayer. I've been to a bunch of his shows, and I
watch him every time he's in town if I'm able to. He's doing solo now. I'm very jealous because you live near the Nokia Theater. Is that still called, or what is it called?
Man, who can keep up? I don't know. They keep renaming. Yeah. But he is doing a solo tour, and I actually don't have tickets for this one.
Yeah, you gotta jump on it.
I really want to do it. I know.
My favorite concert of his of all time was live in LA at the Hollywood whatever it was called Hollywood back then. The Hollywood Bowl, I think it was, or maybe it was something bigger. It's the greatest concert I've ever seen. I have the DVD for it. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
He's also, I mean, going back to the Grateful Dead too, one of the reasons why he plays so well with Dead and Company is because both of them have such an explorative live music perspective. And that's why John, like, he always says, he's like, I don't like when people record my concerts because they're like intended to be really intimate performances that are different night to night. So you catch them on one night and it may be a similar set list, but his rendition of the song is going to be different. And I think that's one of the reasons why people are like, I don't understand why people follow the Grateful Dead night after night. You want to see the same show, but it wasn't the same show. And that's what I learned from my parents, is that like it's actually a favorite band with a different concert every single night. And although John may not do that to the same degree, one of the reasons why he integrated so well with Dead and Company is because he approaches music that way too, where it's so inventive and like fresh. And I have to say, I mean, like, unintentionally tying this back to color, I think I take that perspective as well. As like, I don't like start with like a certain framework that I always use. It's always fresh perspective, organically kind of coming from what content is, and then my approach is, you know, kind of a chameleon like, based on what the content needs most and how I can best elevate it. But similarly, like John responds to like what's maybe like, I'd be curious to hear like what do you think are the factors that most impact? Is it external? Is it internal? Like the way he approaches each night. Like he's probably my number one celeb fan. Definitely my number one celebrity crush. And honestly, my husband would totally approve. He's a huge John Mayer fan too.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Brian would be like, yeah, I get it. Yeah. I support it.
I mean, the first concert I've ever been to of his was my favorite. But then again, really? it was closer to Battle Studies. It was closer to Continuum. And then the second concert I saw was also excellent. It was Born and Raised and
nice.
Paradise Valley. Is that the other one? I think
so. Yeah.
I think it's night to night. I mean, it depends. He has a set list, right, that he creates, and usually it's always unique. He just knows how to engage with the audience, and when you watch a performer like him, it messes you up in a good way, because I love Kings of Leon, but I've seen them live like 2 or 3 times, and Caleb doesn't talk to the crowd. Like he'll come in and say, "Hey, Miami, hey, West Palm, how you doing?" Then they'll start, and then he'll say another thing, maybe
like towards the end. I love the engagement, and you know who also does that? Have you ever seen Dave Matthews?
But I hear that
he's actually really funny. Yeah. He's super funny, and he like will kind of mess with the crowd, like make jokes. It's similar to the way John makes jokes. He's also funny. I like that extra engagement. To me, that's like the X factor that sets up live music in comparison to just like listening to the record at home or whatever.
He did.
I like that.
I'll go a step further. He went and said he gave 3 choices of songs in the first concert I went to. But all he did was play like the first 2 notes of each song. So he played the first 2 notes, and depending on the applause level, that's the song he would play for his last 2 songs. Like
I like that.
Things like that you can tell somebody really loves what they're doing and they're having a good time, and that he loves and appreciates his fans.
Yeah.
That he hasn't lost that perspective. Even so, you know, I know we're going on a tangent here, but even when he lost like he had that issue with his vocal cords, you know, you could tell this is a guy who like his life's, you know, bread and butter, like what he loves to do is perform. And
yeah, totally.
It's funny you mentioned the Grateful Dead. I didn't get to do like a major project on it or anything like that, but it was an NFT company that was publishing Jerry Garcia's. He had a bunch of digital art that he did on the computer, and
Really?
and his family had like an estate of just all of this digital art that they were auctioning off to give to. I think it was to fund a school in San Francisco because he went to a school there.
Yeah,
It's interesting, but
that is cool.
is there anyone singular, like a singular individual? Maybe it's more than one who's had the biggest impact on you, both personally and professionally.
Oh, maybe one individual.
Doesn't have to be one. I don't want to like throw, and then the second person's like, "Hey, what the hell? What about me?"
No, I don't know. I guess my parents, I want to say, they certainly, I'm very grateful that they were the ones that were like, "Do you want to be an artist?" And I was like, "No, I'm gonna go get my PhD." And so sometimes when people like hear my story, they always think like, "Oh, you must have gone the traditional route because of your family," and that's not at all the case, actually. And so when I called them up and told them about coloring, they were like, "Sweet, this sounds so up your alley."
Fully on board.
Yeah. And so I think that I'm very grateful that they've always raised me with the perspective to listen to my intuition. And I think it's my intuition that led me to this career path, and following kind of one thread to the next. Like I said, I certainly didn't want to go to USC. I wanted to go to Penn, and it was really a bummer that I didn't get in. But I figured, well, I'm just going to kind of trust the process and go here instead. And I think because they always taught me to really listen to my instincts and intuition, that's what allowed me to be paying attention when I had such a reaction to it, and to lean into that. They really encouraged me to lean into that.
Were there any key lessons that stick out to you on that's helped shape that mentality for you? Because I was gonna make a note. You do seem analytical as well. Like you seem very analytical in terms of how you approach things, but it's like
any of those like personality studies or whatever, like where it's like your 5 traits, it's like analytical is always one of them.
I feel like you're like a 50-50, you know?
Yeah. I certainly believe in like timing of things, and trusting that the world is going to work out the way it's supposed to for you. And it's not to negate hard times or hardship in any way. And I don't really love the rewording of that mindset of things happen for a reason. But I do believe that things have a way of working out. The Greek have a really interesting word. They have 2 words for time. They have chronos, which is chronological time, and they have kairos, which is transliterated to like Kairos, kairos. And that's like divine timing of things. And that's I think always been a bit of a North Star for me, to the point that I have it tattooed on my wrist.
Chronos, kairos?
Underneath where my watch goes. So it's like underneath where the chronos goes is also a reminder of kairos on the other side. Yeah. Yeah, don't go to a random tattoo on Sunset Boulevard. The ethos is there. It's a little blurry. They went a little too deep in the skin. But, you know, so it's like I like wrote it by hand, and this like had this concept of like the font and like what the font symbolized. But like if you go too far deep, it blurs out like years later. Anyways, I would say that, and there's been a number of times that specific word has actually shown up in my life where I see it on a bumper sticker, or I'm at a Greek restaurant and it there's something that like says like kairos, because it's kind of like a Greek like concept. But I think that having an open mind of being able to receive the right timing of things, or appreciate and believe that although things aren't working out the way you think that they ought to, they are working out the way that they ought to.
Yeah.
And will work out that way.
That's so important. And I think it's obviously, I'm being Captain Obvious, it's easier to do that when things are going well and way hard.
And you think that having it tattooed on you would remind me in all moments. Human nature. No, I still forget often. Tough. And I'm like,
it's tough.
Yeah.
You know, but I think that's why it's important to zoom out and look back at the times that you did think everything was going wrong, you know, when you didn't get into Penn State, and that was like probably the worst thing that you wanted at that moment, that you wanted, it didn't go for you, but then you zoom out and you're like, oh, that was the best thing that could have happened for me in that moment, in so many different ways. And I think it helps you stay filled with hope, and that's so important, especially if you're trying to pursue something, and you've always seems to have been trying to pursue something in terms of, you know, fully believe that if you had chosen criminal neuroscience, you would have been one of the best ones there too. You know, like,
Oh,
but whatever, because it's that mindset. If you have that mindset to be intentional about it and put your all at what you're focusing on in the moment, that I think goes across whatever your interest is. For example, I've read that you like to find the best hikes in chocolate chip cookies. So if you put that same intent, you will eventually, if you don't find it, you'll probably bake it. And that's it.
You know, and I have to say, there's a lot of good chocolate chip cookies in LA. I still make my favorite. So,
you make your own favorite, like, so you can't even get it at a shop. It's just yours.
I mean, I always like to have, try others, but I have my favorite recipe.
Right.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think that it's a kind of a perspective of making things work too.
100%. So what's the best hike in LA? What's for the tourist who hears this?
Trail. I won't gatekeep, even though it's an unknown hiking trail.
Zero Beach Trail?
Zuma Beach.
Zuma.
It's up in Malibu. And you just have to drive a little past where you think you want to go, because it's a little farther.
Okay.
And Zuma Beach Trail, it's beautiful. It's like 5.5 miles up and back. I love hikes where the work is on the front end and then you cruise downhill on the way home. So even though as much as I wish it was like a loop trail, because that's the most ideal,
yes,
it's ocean views like the whole time, and you just can't compete. And it's like almost always deserted. There's nearly never anybody there. I'm also prone to sunrise hikes, so maybe that's partly why.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna look that up after this call is over. We have a few more questions on the I guess these are like the practical lessons of life questions here.
Sure.
And then we'll get into a rapid fire segment we have here.
I'm excited for the rapid fire. Okay.
I don't think I've asked you, but seeing, like, I don't know, zoom back 10 years ago, what does growth look like for you? From a mentality, from a professional perspective and a personal perspective, like how have you seen yourself evolve as a person to where you are today?
Let's see. 10 years ago, I was studying neuroscience and scanning brains, and felt that I had it all figured out, and that undergrad was such a waste of time because I knew exactly what I wanted to study in grad school, and it was just so annoying that I had to put in undergrad hours before I could go to grad school and like study what I actually wanted to do. And I couldn't believe I had to take these stupid GEs in college, and it was just a waste of time. And like, I'm just like, oh, I just want to graduate so I can go to grad school and like do what I meant to do. Little did I know I was there because I was meant to learn about color. So I think that in terms of growth, I know now that even if I think I have everything figured out today, and I'm like, dead set on the fact that I have it all figured out today, things totally may change. I don't see myself ever doing anything other than color. I love it so much, but I'm also not as small-minded as I was 10 years ago, where I could say never, and rule it out. Perhaps there's another world where my love for another industry would inspire me to make a change, and I just don't see that happening. I even say it hesitantly because I love color so much, and I don't see myself ever changing career paths. But if I wasn't a colorist, there's one of two careers that I would definitely love. One is being a jeweler, and it's, I think, partly for similar reasons of equal parts of art and science. And another one is working in the food industry, which is also quite a lot like art and science, particularly for how much I love to bake.
I love the food industry.
I don't know. I guess that's something that is I'm aware of the fact that things can change, and I'm okay with that much more than I was 10 years ago.
That's nice. Do you have a particular personal mission or goal that you try to accomplish, whether it's through your work or that you want to be known for? Like how does that impact your approach?
I don't have a particular mission. I always want to be known for helping people elevate their vision of their film and contributing in that way. Not every collaborative relationship is the same, and I think that I'm best fit with teams that are looking for somebody to help offer things. Although I was born and raised from California, I was very much raised by a New York mother, and I'm opinionated. I'll gladly speak up if I think that there's something that we could do to improve the project, or if there's what I think maybe a better approach to, or at least a different approach that could be considered better. I'll always at least offer it as a suggestion. At the end of the day, it's the creative's film, so. You could just as easily say, no, Arianna, we don't want to do that. But I think I'm best fit with creative teams that are interested in hearing other ideas as they carry along. So, most often when you dive into color, the creative team has been looking at the material for so long, and I've got all kinds of ideas. And I think that that's great. But I also think that there's something tremendously valuable about coming in as a colorist with a viewer perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been living and breathing with the material for nearly as long, and I come in with fresh eyes. And I think that if the tables were turned, I would want to work with a colorist that has that fresh eye perspective and isn't afraid to offer suggestions that may improve the end result. But I also would want a colorist that would be willing for me to say, no, I don't want to do that, after they make a suggestion, and then we do, plan A was. But I would say I would like to be known as somebody who will bring up ideas and help elevate the film.
Do you with that being said, I'll add this question in there. Do you avoid watching the material as much as possible until you get like an actual final cut or close to final?
I do try and preserve the number of times I watch something, and that is why I typically don't like reading scripts. One of the reasons why is, and I always have to stop myself because I'm nosy. I want to know what the story is. Like I really want to learn what the story is, and we're talking about references and inspirations and these characters, and I'm just like, send me the script. I just want to read it. But I've found that one of the ways that I'm able to capture kind of that viewership perspective is to learn the story as I'm seeing the visuals for the very first time. So even if that isn't a rough cut, it doesn't have to be a super mature cut, but even if that is a rough cut, I think it's helpful for me to learn the narrative with the story unfolding. And that helps me kind of capture that really unique viewership perspective.
But how do you do any pre-production? Like if working with them in pre-production, if you're not familiar, in those cases, are you familiarizing yourself with it?
Usually I'm at bare minimum hearing about like overall story synopsis, but I'm not seeing like beat by beat, just the way like reading a script would be. But like, of course they're telling me this is a family drama. This is the main character. His kind of big torment is this, and da da da. And we're also thinking a bit more about we're thinking a bit more technically and about like the actual creative tools than we are like crafting overarching narrative. That's kind of stuff that comes in later at the end anyways. So they can kind of spoil the bigger beats without while I still preserve the details.
And so when you do get that final edit, are you making are you watching it one time clean with a notepad or with your notes open and just kind of jotting notes that come to mind, or are you actually doing a color pass as you're watching it for the first time?
Oh no. Watching with popcorn.
Okay.
I watch as a viewer.
Cool.
100%. I don't take notes. Sometimes I can't help myself but brainstorm. But I avoid writing anything down, or like, I may make some mental notes of like, this scene is going to need some extra balancing just because I'm visually noticing it. But I try and really watch it just like a viewer, just like on the couch, on my TV, and really experience it as close to that viewership perspective as I can.
And last question before we get to the rapid fire here. What films or shows do you consider the holy grails of color perfection, like your personal favorites? And as an add-on, I have two more. And I'll add the other two add-ons after, but they're along the same lines.
Let's see. One of the ones that sticks into mind that always struck me is Blue Jasmine. Ooh. I think that that's a really beautiful film. And in a lot of ways, you're just looking at the whole film through these rose-colored glasses that the main character has, mentally throughout the film. So I think that like that's, I haven't spoken to Woody Allen. I don't know if that was intentional, but that's something that where I feel That's a film where I feel the color does a lot of heavy lifting to forward the narrative along. And I think that that's a tremendous film.
Are there any other colorists or pros you look up to, or you're kind of like, you like seeing their work and I don't know if taking inspiration is the right word, but appreciating their work and just enjoying it?
Yeah, absolutely. Countless. One in particular is Jill. She's fantastic. She's been a great mentor of mine for years.
What's her last name?
Bogdanovich. And she actually colored John Wick along with my husband. They kind of he helped. She was double booked towards the end, so he finished the film.
So sick.
Yeah, but she's got an awesome, very chameleon-like perspective. She also is a painter, and so we've always kind of aligned with having kind of like, I think, a very painterly approach. At least I've been told that we think about things similarly. Particularly, Brian has said that, just knowing both of us very well. I think she's epically talented and just a total rock star.
Nice. And last, the third one. Is there anyone you dream about working with? Any director or actor that you or musician? Well, you mentioned the musician already.
Yeah, probably Scorsese, just because of how much I love Shutter Island. I mean, like, and I think that he's just got such an also.
Who wouldn't, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's so many great Scorsese films, and I'm like, this is just a total riot, and really just so fun to work with. Yeah. His also is. I feel like general approach is very chameleon-like, like in just lots of different. Yeah, lots of different ways.
They say the flower. What is it? The Killer of the Flower Moon or something like that. It's coming out on Apple TV pretty soon with DiCaprio.
Is it?
Yeah,
it's coming out soon. Oh, I want to look it up. Let's find out the date.
I think they said it's clocking near 4 hours or something like that.
Really? Wow, that's long.
I think it's coming out. Does it come out in May or June? I think it's coming around there, something like that.
I didn't actually find it, but like someone. I mean, I think that somebody who can come out with Shutter Island and Wolf of Wall Street and make them both fucking great films, like that, I have a lot of respect for Scorsese, because like those are two of my favorite movies, and they are nothing alike. I would argue, and I think that. I guess I mean, I don't know. I'm sure there's plenty of film people could like draw all these parallels and be like, well, they're both so Scorsese because of this, this, and this. But like, I would like to hear what that list is, because to me, I'm like, those look genre-wise, energy-wise, like they're just very different pacing, and they're two of my favorite movies. And I think that's so awesome that they're brainchilds of one individual.
I think that's the beauty of his genius, is that you don't need to know exactly why you like it.
Yeah.
It's that it just communicates on a different wavelength, and you just like the same way you watch a Tarantino film and you're like, oh, this is Tarantino, or like this is
yeah, totally. I would say in terms of like and not necessarily people, all of my favorite films tend to be, most of my favorite films, Shutter Island excluded from this, tend to be true stories. I like Social Network is another one of my favorite films. 21 is another one of my favorite films. I love films where you get to see someone kind of like on this crazy ride, experience this crazy ride.
The Blackjack movie?
Yeah.
I love that movie. It's good. It's that's a sleeper. And I've never heard someone ever mention that amongst their favorites.
It's so good. I've seen it so many times. Easily still one of my favorite go-tos. But I would love to be a part of like a period piece where I get to color a period piece that's about a true story. And period wise, like, you mentioned Tarantino. I guess I'm thinking like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood era would be like maybe an ideal. Like if somebody wants to make a really great actual story about Manson and Sharon Tate, like I would die for that project.
You love that era of Hollywood, like the 60s, 50s, 60s, that sort of thing?
Yeah, definitely. I've always been interested in like counterculture era anyways, and particularly growing up around the Grateful Dead and hearing so much about counterculture era. And
you would love Tarantino's new book, his first book actually. I'm blanking on the name. I'll text it to you after. But he does a full-on breakdown of the evolution of film from the 60s to the 70s of the new wave, and getting into like how film changed and whatnot.
Sounds super interesting.
If you know him, he's a film like he has the memory of an elephant when it comes to film. It's ridiculous.
That's cool.
So you'd love that one for sure.
I'll take a peek.
Okay, so We're getting into the rapid fire here.
Oh, excited. I don't think well on my feet, so I'm a little stressed. Let's hear it.
Well, one of my favorite shows growing up was Inside the Actor Studio.
Okay.
James Lipton interviews that show, and I've always loved the way he ended that show with this like 10 fire question segment. He would just like pop them off. It was almost, well, since you're into psychology and criminal neuroscience, hopefully no criminal pathologies emerge here, but you know, it's like a Rorschach test almost. Whatever first comes to your mind is what you say.
Yeah.
So that's
totally. All right.
All right. So here we go. We got 10 questions. Arianna Shining Star.
Yes.
Here we go.
Number 1.
What is your favorite word?
Hello.
Hello. Okay.
Came to mind first.
First answer of hello on the show. What is your least favorite word?
Pneumono ultra microscopic silicone volcanoconiosis, because I spent a lot of time trying to memorize that when I was in 7th grade. And I still remember. It's the longest word in the English dictionary, and it is a disease you get from inhaling volcanic ash.
Holy crap. Okay, well, I just heard and I don't know what it is or heard it again, but
that must have been, you must have heard that one many times though as your least favorite word, right?
No, never. Just
okay. I'm pretty new with hello,
you're one of one.
And I'm not going to repeat the other one.
One of one. Okay, well, what gets you going? What inspires you?
A good run gets me going in the morning.
You're a runner.
That's where I took that at first, is when you said what gets me going. Waking up, I got a really good run ahead of me.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So marathon runner?
No, I've never run a marathon. The furthest I've run is 15 miles. That was like a casual Sunday that I was like, I don't know. I just kept like making it longer.
Nice.
I've never run any kind of a race. I find that I only recently discovered running. It was during the pandemic when everyone's, trying to get 10K steps a day so they weren't sitting on the couch all day. And I thought, well, I can do this a lot more efficiently if I just go on a jog.
Running. Yeah.
And then I learned that I was started to really enjoy my runs and looked forward to them. So then I kind of started taking it a little bit more seriously and more than just little trots around the block. Now what gets me going in the morning, like this morning, was like, all right, tackle a really fun run.
Nice. What puts you off?
Rules that don't make sense. Like don't be hitting me with dumb rules. Like, gotta justify the rule. That sets me off so fast. I wish I could think of an off the cuff example. Yeah, like I don't know. I returned something from Guitar Center yesterday, and they were like, "Oh, well, we can only return it to the card if like the person is present." And I was like, "Okay, it's my husband that bought it though. Like, we have the same last name. Can you just return it on this card?" And I'm like. And then they were like, "Oh, it's not possible. It's not possible." And I was like, "Really?" And the manager came over and just did it. And I was like, "See, like, why do we have to go through this? Like, why? Dumb rules. Dumb rules put me off."
What sound or noise do you love?
The noise of my front door opening. Usually it means my husband's home.
Oh, you play that bit of this for him, and that'll make his day there. All right. What sound or noise do you hate?
Car alarms.
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, that's a great one.
There was someone who used to park outside of a place that Brian and I lived, where she would always lose her car wherever the block is, and she would set off her car alarm to find her car, as opposed to just like using the honk thing.
Yeah.
But she worked this midnight shift where it was always Saturday morning. And there was one day where I went out there in a robe and I was like, "Lady, we got to figure out a different system." So I think that like is ingrained in me. There was a few too many months in a row where every Saturday morning I would wake up to a car alarm. I haven't moved past that one yet. Okay.
Lots of people have said popsicles, like the I think somebody mentioned that one once, like if you like that the wood, this is mine, maybe I'm just projecting it, that wooden stick, like that feeling of
well, I would add that as one of my least favorite feelings. I think it's the
feeling. I felt it right now.
I don't like the wood. I don't like wood on my tongue. In fact, just a couple weeks ago, Brian and I went to a frozen yogurt place, a new one in Malibu.
Wooden spoons.
And we walked right out. I was like, no, the answer is no. Like, there's no grocery store next door I can get a plastic spoon at. Like, you just fully lost our business.
My whole mouth is numb right now.
I like a reverse to it.
Yeah, same. What profession, you kind of mentioned this earlier, but what profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Oh, definitely. One day I think I will work in a jewelry shop or work. I don't really want to be a chef. at all, but I'd love
Mhm.
to be like a food critic. What
awesome.
job is it where I just go and dine
Eat
at different
food.
restaurants? What's eating as a career path?
Yeah.
I would love to. I think in another life, I would have loved to be a food critic, or definitely jeweler. I love jewelry.
Yeah, we have something in common there. My first job was in the food industry. I mean, obviously,
Really?
like on the low totem pole, of working at a Panera Bread. But I loved the fast paced of being in the kitchen during a rush hour and like having to, one person has one station, another has another, one guy's consolidating. I love the rush of that.
Adrenaline of the restaurant world. Yeah, I worked in a restaurant in college and I loved it. It was such a blast. It was hard work, but I really enjoyed it.
So rewarding, and you get so close to everybody there. On the flip side, I worked retail selling perfume at a mall. It was the worst job. Actually, but let me not say anything slow is horrible for me.
Yeah.
It's like
slow is tough. It puts me to sleep. I'm with you on that. I'd rather work a fast-paced job where I'm like, oh my God, 6 hours just flew by. I haven't sat down than a job that is like really meditative.
Agree. I'd rather work my ass off for like 8 hours than stand around for 12. Like, no, it's just not.
Yeah.
Woo! Anyways. Okay. So jeweler or baker or food critic, Anthony Bourdain style. What profession would you not like to do?
And truly anything slow, like a security guard, something where you're just like, your whole job is just to stand there. I actually did do, one of my jobs in college was security, which is really just checking people in at the library. But it was great because I had the midnight shift always, which meant I could do all my homework and study. But if I didn't, it would be so painfully boring, mindless, like mind numbing. I couldn't ever just sit there and scan IDs all day.
Oh my gosh.
Bad.
What is a bit of advice or wisdom you wish you knew before starting your own journey as a colorist?
A piece of advice, color specific?
No.
Wisdom?
It could be anything, whatever comes to mind, I guess. If you want to make one practical and one technical, you can go for it.
I think that I'd never take feedback personally. You always want to nail it on the first go, but like I think it was only until I saw these when I was an assistant colorist, seeing veteran colorists get notes, and I was like, oh, so it's like okay that people have like notes.
Yeah.
And now I always say, like, I get notes for a living. Like I want the whole team to love it, and that usually there's feedback involved. Sometimes you nail it and they're like, great, okay, honestly, no notes. But I think that it took me the first definitely at least year of like being like, oh no, I didn't like do everything exactly right. Like there's an truly endless number of ways to adjust an image. So I would give myself the advice to not take notes personally and just always remember that it's like normal. It's okay to have feedback. And to make sure that the creative team also is very comfortable giving feedback.
I like that.
I always want the team to feel like they can give me that I take notes for a living, so I want them to give me the notes.
Yeah. And lastly, what do you want your obituary to say about you, your legacy?
Oh man, Arianna is a woman of polarity. She loves to go on good long runs and loves to make chocolate cake. And she loves to go to concerts and she loves to sit at home on her couch. I think that I love to camp and I love 5-star hotel. I definitely have appreciation for, I think, the vast range of spectrum of things that life can offer. I'm very happy eating tacos. I'm very happy eating in a 5-star restaurant.
Simple and
complex. I think I appreciate both the same in different ways, but to the same degree.
Love it. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show. It was honestly a pleasure to talk to you and geek out a bit, and makes me want to talk to more production people on the show, like just to be able to geek out like that. But please take the time now, let the audience know how they can keep up with you, like what you're doing, the best way to get in touch, or just to kind of follow up with all your latest to-dos and work that you got cranking out.
Yeah. Well, let's see. The latest to-dos tend to wind up on Instagram once I get my act together to post things, which I have just like this ridiculous
It's a
backlog.
never-ending struggle. Yeah.
It's like, yeah, everything. I've never once caught up on Instagram. There's always more to post, and so Instagram, Arianna Shining Star, 2 N's in Arianna, not like Grande. Everyone spelled my name correctly until she got famous, and then just like went downhill from there. And email. I'm terrible with DMs. So if I catch a DM, it's out of luck. If I ignore a DM, it's not personal. But my email, my phone number are linked to my Instagram as well. So always happy to say hey.
You hear that, people? Critiques aren't personal, and neither is Arianna if she accidentally ignores your DM. Well, if by your permission, we could include your email in the show notes if you want.
Sure.
But
yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you so much.
This was for having me.
I hope you enjoyed it. This was so
fun. You've given me some interesting food for thought too. I have never once been asked the question, "What would your obituary say?" And I tried to make that as lightning-y as possible, but now I'm kind of reflecting. I'm kind of into that. It makes me kind of want to go get some street tacos, and then also makes me want to go to a Michelin-star restaurant.
Yeah, there you go.
So maybe that's the inspo for the weekend. I'll hit both.
Well, if I could ever bring value to you in that way, then fantastic. Thanks
so much, Mario, for chatting.
Likewise. All right.
Talk to you later.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Soapbox Business Show. You can find this podcast anywhere you find podcasts, Apple, Google, and Spotify podcasts, or you can visit our website at soapbox.house.